and welcome to Adventures Live 2021. My name is Oredwa, and this is a panel on releasing the power of internalized guilt and shame. Today I have three wonderful women with me, and they're going to introduce themselves now. Barbara, please introduce yourself in one or two sentences.
Okay, hi. Thank you so much for having me on. My name is Barbara or Adam. You can call me both, I don't mind. I'm a sexual health practitioner, have been for the best part of the last 10 years, and I'm co-director of an organisation called Decolonizing Contraception.
Awesome. Jessica, could you go next?
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Mandanda. I am for the International Youth Alliance for Family Planning, as well as the National Coordinator for Girl Talk, which is a movement that is being implemented by an organization called Choose Yourself. Yes, I am a sexual and reproductive health and rights champion. Thank you.
Wonderful. And Pam, finally.
My name is Pam. I'm a marketing and communication strategist and an MA student in policy design. I'm also a pleasure activist. Yes.
Thank you all for introducing yourselves. So first, I wanted to give you all a chance to talk about your work and ask how internalized sexual shame and guilt show up in that work with other people. And so I'd like to hear from Pam, and then Jessica, and then Barbara.
So for me, I suppose because a lot of my work involves my peers, and a large part of that involves organizing concert workshops at businesses and with organizations, and how that shows up most often, unfortunately, often it shows up it's reflected more in the women than in the men. It shows up as an inability to even imagine a world where sex is for pleasure and not just for, you have, which sort of influences what they think consent means. So for me, a large part of shame surrounds what it means to own your sexuality, what it means to even enjoy pleasure and find ways to incorporate it into your sexual life. Yeah.
Thank you. Jessica?
I think for me, it's very similar to what Pam has just said, in that it comes up a lot, especially when we're talking about a lot of African societies, including Malawi. Women and girls have been raised to have that shame attached to our bodies and that shame attached to our sexuality. In that, because of that shame, it is very difficult for a lot of girls and a lot of women, especially as you're a young woman still trying to figure out your own sexuality and still trying to understand your own body. It is very difficult to separate incidences of harassment or incidences of assault, from your entire sexual experience, where some women to this day still don't understand that they have that right to those decisions are rightly attached to ownership, and that men own our bodies, and so there's no separation between the two. And we've spent so much time in our work and all these workshops trying to dismantle that, trying to explain that that's not how it is, and that we have to take the power for ourselves. But yeah, that's essentially it. A lot of women, young women and girls, don't know how to separate incidences of assault and harassment from their entire sexual experience.
Okay, that's very insightful. And Barbara, we'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, I agree with Pam and Jessica. As somebody who spent the last 10 years in the UK, predominantly working with African communities, it's really interesting to see how the sort of the shame around the culture, exactly what Jessica was saying, even though things are a bit more lax, a bit more open, the people still conform to these, things around, oh, you shouldn't do X, Y, Z because of that. People are very ashamed of their bodies. People are very shameful of having open, honest, frank conversations around sex. So that's, one of the ways in which that shows up. But, just like Jessica was saying, it's something that, for me personally, that's ingrained in you. I was somebody that developed really early. I was wearing training bra in class 1. I had my period when I was 9. Like, I was someone that developed very early, and as you would all know, it means that men, give you attention, right? And I was always blamed for the attention that other people gave me for just my body existing, right? Like, I wasn't doing anything, and it's your fault and stuff. And that's how very early on it starts, right? That's how the shame starts, right? So even to a point where, even as grown and all the things that I know now, I have this constant internal battle with myself, right? Which is like, okay, why are you feeling shame that someone's complimenting you around your body? Because for a very long time, I felt shame because I was told that that's the wrong, like, I hate myself. People think you just sort of like, oh, I'm sex positive, I'm this and that. So no, it's like something you work on every single day, because the other forces, like the other way of living, the other way of being, is so ingrained in our culture. It's something that we grew up with, that we have to keep continuously doing this work to be in a place in which, like Jessica said, like Pam said, we're putting our pleasure, pleasure is important to us. We're putting, we're making sure that we're consenting to the sexual experiences that we're having. Just, sometimes it's easy to be, a passenger, right? It's easy to go on autopilot and let things happen to you. And that's something that you have to constantly fight to sort of maintain. It's not something you just get, and that's at the end of the day.
Just in this conversation. So there's ownership and agency, ownership of our bodies. There is issues of consent. And then we can clearly see that the shame starts from early. It starts in childhood, and it is a result of social norms. And so we'll talk a bit about that. But from your brief introductions, we can tell that shame and overcoming shame is a matter of urgency because of how it impacts the way we navigate our sexual health, our safety, and our pleasure. Ways that we can free ourselves from sexual shame and also help other people to do the same. And I think, in fact, all three of you, your work is helping other people to free themselves. And so hopefully you can give us some pointers and advice on that. So I think we can first speak about considering social norms and particularly religion. How has shame impacted your own sexual experiences? And what did that teach you about shame and sexuality? Yeah, Pam, please start. I'm so sorry.
Okay. And in college, I realized when it was time to renew my glasses, I walked into a shop and there were tons of options. I did not have to wear the options my mom or my sister had been giving me, because there were these amazing array of colors, and there was red and there was pink, and I could pick whichever one I wanted. And I had never felt that level of freedom because it had always been picked for me. And so I was standing there with my partner at that time, and I said, oh, I can pick anything I want. And he said, yes, you could. You're an adult. You can pick whatever you want. And it felt like a switch, because instantly I was like, why has this never occurred to me that I could pick whatever option I want and not have to worry about what someone else thought? It felt, when I was a preteen as well, I was part of PPAG, and so I would do peer counseling. We would go on outreaches to smaller communities. I grew up in the Bunahafo region, so it felt almost like yes, I think this should be better. It felt like an instant, it clicked in my head, unfortunately, that all this while I had not fully embraced the extent to which I could be me without being offended by someone else's opinion of that. And that sort of began my slow journey towards understanding what pleasure meant for me. From then on, it worked like magic, unfortunately, because at every point I would ask myself, does this make me happy? Is this bringing me pleasure? Am I okay to do this? And that sort of spiraled into where I am right now. For me, unlearning shame started with erotica. I think I was in high school, and my schoolmates will always bring books, Harlequin Desires, and I would read these books, and it felt so liberating to see this on paper. And so I started writing erotica when I was in high school. I would stay up late after class, write something just because I felt like it. And even then, I did not think it was liberating, because I felt like, oh, this is something I can do, not necessarily this is something that frees me. And so when I made that discovery, quote unquote, in the glasses shop and pick the glasses I want out of sheer pleasure, it began. Right now I'm in my mother's house, and I am pretty sure she's listening and she's wondering, when did she start all these things? Because we don't have conversations like that in my household. I have all my siblings have children, but everybody just kind of assumes that children are born. There is no conversation about the sexual part of it. So it felt really like it's hard every day. Like Barbara said, I have to make a conscious effort to unlearn some of these things. I had to consciously unlearn repression and what that meant for my sexual journey. So I wouldn't say I have completely unlearned my shame. I think it's a journey. It's a conscious journey that I make every day, with my writing, with my consent workshops, with my tweets, with my Instagram posts. Every day I make a conscious effort to unlearn what I have been taught every single day of my life is wrong about sex. When I'm born, there is no conversation about the sexual part of it. So it felt really like it's hard every day. Like Barbara said, I have to make a conscious effort to unlearn some of these things. I had to consciously unlearn repression and what that meant for my sexual journey. So I wouldn't say I have completely unlearned my shame. I think it's a journey. It's a conscious journey that I make every day, with my writing, with my consent workshops, with my tweets, with my Instagram posts. Every day I make a conscious effort to unlearn what I have been taught every single day of my life is wrong about sex. So yeah, I think it's an ongoing journey for me.
Thank you so much. And so we can see from what Pam has shared that erotica is one way that a young girl or a young woman can begin to unlearn the idea of shame around sex. So next, I'd like to hear from Jessica on how you began to unlearn and begin to unlearn the idea of shame around sex. So next, I'd like to hear from Jessica on how you began to unlearn shame and guilt, say, in your youth.
I think first, let me just also say that, I agree with that. It's a process. It's an everyday process in that, I haven't gotten to the point where I've reached this ultimate unlearned version of myself. No, I'm still continuously unlearning, and every single day is a new day to unlearn something, especially because these things have been so deeply ingrained in us. Issues to like the shame that we have about our bodies are so deeply ingrained that it will take so much of your life just to unlearn those things. And as you unlearn, you start to question, like, why did I have to be ashamed of this in the first place? I think for me, my journey started somewhere around when I had my son. I had my son when I was 17 years old. And that entire experience is a blur to me because I cannot pinpoint to say what exactly was happening at the time. I think even if I was to have a conversation with, the person that I conceived my child with, I don't think there's anything I can pinpoint to actually describe that experience as a sexual, something that I can consider a sexual experience for me. You know, and in between that time and when I got to the point of I actually like my body and I like to enjoy what comes with my body, there were moments, like little sparks, when I'd be like, I don't like that thing that's been done to me right now. And there were little sparks where I would feel bad about my body, but I would also question myself at the same time, say, why do you feel bad when there's absolutely no point to feel bad? The overall turning point for me, I think, had to be maybe about 4 years ago, when I really hit rock bottom because of how I felt about my body. I'd gotten sick and I lost some weight, and I received a lot of compliments because I'd lost weight, but it was as a result of me being sick, and that didn't make me feel good. I was like, and at the same time, I started receiving comments and compliments from several male human beings who would be now, who would, come in to show interest. And I was like, why showing interest now when you didn't show interest before, when I had, the extra few kilos on my body? And it was very, it doesn't seem like a very big moment, but it was a moment where I started questioning so many things. And as I started questioning all those things, my experience with other people started changing. There were a lot of things that I would let happen to me, happen to my body. I would consent to these experiences. However, they were not experiences I enjoyed, and also for me, the same for Pam, I also found a lot of liberation when I got to now writing about those experiences. I'm a writer, so writing has always been a part of me. And I moved from writing about nature. I used to write about trees and animate them, like they're people. And I moved from that to writing about how I felt about my body. And as I started writing about how I felt about my body and detailing that entire experience of questioning how other people saw me and how people responded to my unplanned weight loss, I started detailing those things and those experiences. And then that translated into me detailing my sexual experiences as well. And as I read my pieces over and over, I realized there was nothing happy about any of those experiences. You see on TV, like for example, you watch shows like Sex and the City, and there's Samantha in there who is talking about her sexuality so proudly, and she is expressing how she enjoys those experiences. And I would go back and I would assess my experiences, and I'm like, something's amiss, something's not right. What is it that's not being done right? And from then I started reading more and writing more. And as I did that, every single time I read something about, women's bodies, or I read an erotica piece, or I read something that I've written, it was this whole journey of discovery that there is so much more out there that doesn't have to be so bad. And on top of that, there was also the same question of, why do I have to feel guilty? And also, this is something that I also relate with Pam, is that I just moved back to my mother's house because I switched jobs, and and I'm in this household. But because I question why I have to be ashamed and why I have to feel guilty for being who I am and expressing myself, especially being proud of my sexual expression, it's been, now I can question, like if an auntie or somebody from the family comes to question why I do certain things, it's a matter of why not. And when you ask that question of why not, you will not find an answer. You will not find an answer to why not. Nobody's going to tell you, oh, here's a list of reasons why you shouldn't do that. And one last thing that I found very liberating has been looking at my body. Before I took these steps and before finding myself and finding that love for myself, I could never look at my body in the mirror at all. Like, I could look at it from here up, everything from here below. I could not look at it. And I used to dress that way. I wouldn't look at myself in the mirror when I got dressed. So I used to wear ill-fitting clothes, etc. And after I took this journey, like, I spent time looking at myself. Which also translated into, I took a moment to just take photos, and not the nudes that you send to partners or whatever. I took professional pictures for myself just to look at. And when I did that, I also started questioning, why didn't I want to look at myself before? What was the reason? Because I don't have a problem with myself. And that all of that put together, this entire journey now became about me. How do I feel about myself? And removing the elements of other people, and all their opinions about me and how I feel about myself and my expression. And so I think for me, the most important thing is getting to that point where you develop that very positive relationship with yourself and starting to unlearn why you don't have that positive relationship with yourself. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. And Barbara, could you please speak? Just to remind you of the question, it's how shame has impacted your childhood, your own sexual experiences, and how you began to unlearn it.
So when I was asked to join this panel, I was scrolling on Instagram and my friend had shared this quote. So it's from this person called Emmy Voskamp, and it says, "Shame dies when stories are told in safe places," right? And for me, I think, part of the reason why I ended up being in sexual health was that, when I first had my early sexual experience, right into my teens, into my 20s and stuff, my friends were people that I could speak to about what was happening, even though living with my mum at that time, and she would absolutely kill me if she knew I was having sex. She suspected it, but she never caught me, so I could always deny it. But my friends were people that I could talk to. I had a close-knit of friends when I was in college. In fact, we used to take each other to the clinic if somebody's condom failed and they needed a morning after pill. We would pretend we're willing to support. And I think for me, that's kind of where I started. I was like, okay, well, these are my friends. They've not shamed me for anything that happened. They think it's perfectly fine. They're very supportive. When I make a stupid mistake, they will go to the clinic with me and be there for me. They don't have a guide. They don't shout at me, anything like that. And I think for me, that was the beginning of unlearning shame, really to do with sex. And it's completely normal, it's completely okay, it's completely fine, as long as you're being safe and the person you're with is also being safe with you. So I think that's really where it began, and that's why that quote resonated with me so much, because I was able to tell my story in a safe space, and it was no longer shame, right? It was just something I was going through, and that's really what motivated me to end up working in the sector, because I was like, more people need to have people in their lives, or people that they meet professionally, who affirm whatever it is that they're going through, who can provide them with support and advice, and affirm whatever it is. And like I said, a lot of my work has been with African communities, has also been with young people, where it's just sex is a very, very normal part of life. So it's just the other thing as well, it's just there's lots of stuff around the law, etc., right? Because it's you can't have sex till you're 16, but we know a lot of people under the age of 16 have sex. And for me, it's always been well, people are going to have sex regardless, so we need to ensure that they have the correct information so they can make whatever choice it is that is best for them, and they can make safe choices, right? So, unlearning the shame, like I said earlier, it's really a continuous process, because you can really find yourself falling back into, going on autopilot, falling back to habit. Because unlearning the shame, going out there and getting what you want and that pleasure, it's a lot of work. Right? It's a lot of work. It's something that you have to be committed to doing all the time, right? You have to meet people, and you have to commit to doing, you have to make sure that, your needs are being met, all of that. And you have to make sure that, shame doesn't become the reason why you're not getting what you want in sexual relationships, that you're not getting the pleasure that you need. And sometimes people can put that shame on us, right? Especially those of us that have sexual experiences with men. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, do they like to shame. They like to shame a lot. Oh, you're not supposed to be this way, or oh, you're a bit this. And it's like, but you have to keep committed to doing, because if you don't, other people will shame you for things that they are also enjoying, that you are also enjoying. So yeah.
Thank you so much, all three of you. And as all of you have rightfully pointed out, unlearning shame is a continuous process, because so apart from leaning on their supportive friends, or writing, or looking at and appreciating their bodies, or confronting relatives who've shamed them, like you've all shared, what are some interventions that other people can make to stop slut shaming? Could Jessica please speak to this, and then Pam, and then Barbara?
In the Malawian Penal Code, there's an actual provision that talks about insulting the dignity of a woman, and under that they talk about slut shaming and catcalling, and how that is against the law. It's just that people don't know that that's against the law. That's one thing we can do legally as an intervention. I think another thing is to implement comprehensive sex and sexuality education in the education system, so that kids start learning from a young age, what they need to understand. And the good thing about comprehensive sex education is that it goes against the social and gender norms that a lot of us grew up, with. And so I think that is also a very important thing for a lot of governments to implement, and then that will trickle down to all the other generations, and it will be good. And I think for my young women and women who, I think a very important question to ask anybody who goes forth with slut shaming is, ask them, and then what? Okay, so you have a problem with, the number of people that I have been with, and then what? You have a problem with how I express myself, and then what? Just ask them that. They will never have an answer for you. Just ask them, okay, and then what? I think that is something that has worked for me so far in my young adulthood, is just, and then what? Yeah. So those three things for me.
All right, thank you so much. Pam, I'd like to hear from you.
Yes. Before I answer the question, her comment just reminded me of something that really changed my ideas about nudes and my body. A couple of years ago, this was like maybe 2016 or 2015. I was with someone who really helped me own my sexuality. And as I began to take more expressive photos of myself, I had this, folder on my phone. I would take cute pictures because I had no one to send them to. I would send them to my girlfriends, and I would love them. I'll just look at them. I'll be so happy looking at them. And once they were on my phone, which was a red flag, and they saw the photos and they were like, oh, good girls don't do that. I'm like, I'm not a good girl. And that was the end of the conversation. And because I would say that in all ways, people always assume that I'm a good girl, which I don't know what that even means, right? But this was someone that I had been with for such a long time, and their first response to seeing photos of me on my phone, not sharing with anyone else, was, good girls don't do this. And I said, I'm sorry, I'm not a good girl. And that changed the dynamic of our relationship. Essentially, it broke down, basically. What she said reminded me of that, because when you say I'm not a good girl, and so what would you like for me to do with your opinion of my pictures, there is never a good response. And one of the things that I strive to do on a daily basis is to not police and legislate desire. I had the privilege of working with and being able to study under and join groups that took comprehensive sexual education seriously, right? And one of those groups was called Virgins Club, which my mom was so happy for me to join. Little did she know that all we learned about in that club was how to have safe sex and contraceptives. And, I'm sure she can hear me right now and she's cringing in her seat. But yeah. And so by the time I left high school and I went into senior high school, and people did not know any of these things, I did. And I became sort of like the go-to person, which has now manifested in what I do now. But yeah, it's always that point for me where I do not want to legislate or police what you think desire is for you. And that's what slut shaming really is about. It's about you wanting to tell somebody that this is okay for you, but this is not okay for you. And essentially, nobody ever has that right. You do not ever have the right to be able to say to a person, you can do this, but you can't do this. Or this is okay for you, but this is not okay for you, So for me, what Jessica said, spot on. Those three things are the most important things. And the final point for me that I would add is just always push back, because there is never a good reason. And of course, pushing back also means expecting some level of violence, and we always have to find a way to navigate those, because you never know what the person's response is going to be at. You always have to gauge, which is such a tiring thing, especially as Barbara said, if you are be or that me and say, hi, I'm sorry, this does not work for me. And being able to say, it's not my fault that you are not aware of these things. It's not my fault that you do not have the knowledge or the tools available to navigate your sexual journey, but I do, and I work at it, and I do not give you permission to police me. And so I refuse what you're saying. That completely changed how I feel about slut shaming. You can call me a slut. I have a hashtag on Twitter called We Are Whores. I am fine with you calling me a whore. If that makes you happy, that's okay. But I am perfectly fine with being a whore. It makes no difference to me what you think. And that changed the dynamic for me. I do not care. That's like the baseline. I always tell my friends, whenever someone says something, even if it's paining you and killing you inside, show them that I do not care face. I don't give a fuck. Whatever you're saying, it's going here and coming out here. And as you begin to own that sort of sentiment, it changes everything. For me, at least, yeah.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. So some of the lessons I've got from everything that you've all said is, there's legislation that can protect young people and anyone who's being slut shamed from slut shaming. But there's also a way for people to take back their power, and they can learn and kind of come together and be supported by their communities through clubs at schools or through organizations like some of the ones you work with. You've all been very modest. You haven't talked about your work, but we'll get to that. And then also just from individuals and activists and people who care like yourselves, setting a public example of rejecting those shame-filled narratives. So that's really powerful. And so as we are getting to the close of this panel, I wish we could go on some more. Let me see, what is my last question? Okay, so Barbara works with decolonizing contraception and runs with her colleagues the sex agenda workshops. And then Pam runs consent workshops. You'll have to forgive me, I don't know the name of the organization. And then Jessica is a sexual and reproductive health and rights advocate, as well as the country coordinator for the International Youth Alliance for Family Planning. And so in all these these are more official, public facing positions and roles. And in fact, Pam can speak to this as a communications professional. I imagine that language is very important. And so even as we want to reject shame, people still exist in various social contexts where there is shame. And so they may want a level of discretion around accessing information and resources related to sexual and reproductive health, for example. So how do you all honor people's desire for discretion while avoiding, creating more shame around the topic and around sex? I'd like Barbara to speak on this, and then Pam, and then Jessica. All right, thank you.
I think that there is a distinct difference between confidentiality and propagating shame or creating an environment of shame. I think confidentiality is one of those things that, for me, has been like a key pillar of my work, right? Because people need to be able to come to you and speak about something, and then if for whatever reason you see them whilst they're walking down the street, you look that way and they look that way, everybody keeps it moving, is incredibly important, because in some cases you can bump into people that you've seen professionally. But I think that, the kind of environment that you create as well, so we talked earlier about not just the health side of things, but I think it's really important to mirror people's language when they speak to you about these things as well, because, there are technical and medical terms and things, but there are also, the slang and the colloquial terms that people use for things. I think it's important to mirror people's language, because that shows you, sort of the language that they're comfortable to use. And I think that, sometimes things can get medicalized a lot, and that can cause people a bit of anxiety or even sometimes shame. So I think that there is a fine line between confidentiality and shame. I think even in keeping confidentiality, again, because like shame is pretty much a lot of the time an internal thing. People can still feel shame around those things, right? And they can know their background or their relationship status, if it hasn't got anything to do with why they're there. So I think that there's still a long way to go, because again, like sex it's so interesting, right? Because like our media and public space is a lot of times sexualized, right? Like the IG models, the influencers and stuff, everything is like heavily sexualized, right? And our films and TV and music videos and songs and stuff are incredibly sexualized, so we pretend like they're not. And I think that those are things that we have to reconcile with as well.
Also, I just want to say I love Nazim. For me, language informs, right? So a lot of the things that we learn as children and as adults is from language. So if you constantly refer to sex and sexual activity like Barbara said, at least twice a day I hear sexual ads on radio or TV or somewhere, right? They pop up on my Instagram feed now. I didn't even know that was possible, but there's always like some drug or some malam or some traditional leader, how bad it was, because I did not know that it was okay to say these things, because they felt like very dirty words to me, right? And that is the problem with language. We are taught from a very, very young age that the private part, it's so private, you should not even call it by its name, And sex is this thing that we do behind doors, and you never have to talk about it. So that is my approach, that call it by its name. And if you have so much shame attached to it, say it, which is the most beautiful thing. It's the easiest way to recapture your joy for something, right? So that is what I try to do in my day-to-day life, in my consent workshops, which I do as an individual. And they really started with me constantly having conversations with people about reproductive health rights, right? So that is also how I made a lot of my friends. I have a friend called Jessica, and that's how we became friends, because I would constantly be talking about reproductive health rights and what to do as a woman to even be able to say, this is something I need. I would walk into in my second year of university, my older sister visited me, I think it was my third year or my final year. And she said, oh, let's go get contraceptives. And I said, I already have contraceptives. And she was like, what? And I was like, you were about to take me to get some, and I'm telling you I already have some. What is the shock for, right? But that is what it means to be Ghanaian. It means to hide all these things that we do so that you can continue to appear like as a good girl. So for me, I always try to use the right language, call the things by its name, and find a way for you to get comfortable. I don't think that everybody's going to be comfortable with saying the word penis or saying fuck, but I need you to get to the place where you understand that it's okay if you wanted to say these things. It's okay if you don't want to say these things too. But the most important thing is that it's coming from you and not coming from what you have learned or what you have indoctrinated into you as a human being. Because that's what pleasure means, honestly. Pleasure, it's you being able to express yourself in all the ways that you can. And I'm so grateful for Adrienne Marie Brown, because without her, I would not have the word to say pleasure activist, because I always just said, oh, I want people to be happy. And then I read her book, Emergent. Sorry, I forget. But then it sort of opened up my mind towards the idea that words have meaning, and it's important to have those things, right? So yeah, I agree with Barbara, and I agree, call things by the name and let language inform how you approach people, let language inform how you approach concepts, let language inform how you are empathetic towards other people. People are operating from different places. You need to meet them in the places that they are most comfortable, and then encourage them to leave those places. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through communication and language. So that's what I try to do. Yeah.
Right, thank you so much, Pam and Jessica. As you answer the question, you could also give your final thoughts on releasing the power of internalized sexual guilt and shame.
I think for me, one thing that I've tried to do with my son is to ensure and enforce that he calls every part of his body by its name. And that has helped, in the beginning it was odd, because like a lot of the grown-ups around him were like, oh my gosh, this child is saying the word penis. And I was like, yes, because he has one. It's not a strange thing. It's not a horrible thing. He has one. He should know what it's called. He should call it what it is. And it took some time for everybody to get used to it. And I can still see the discomfort among the people, but because he knows what it is, he can say it without shame, without feeling bad. And if anybody comes to him to say, why are you saying that word? He'll be like, but that's what it's called, And that for me has been a very big thing. And I wish that, I wish somebody had done that for me when I was little. But I also understand, different cultures and how we were all socialized and how we were all raised. That was quite difficult. But I think, to just now flow into my final words, I think, because we're having these conversations now, because we're starting to unlearn all of this, that's the only way that we can get to a point where we see people, we live in a society where we're not attaching shame and guilt to sexual expression, especially for women. Just dismantle everything. If people, the world is not going to change. The world is not going to be swallowed into a black hole if we just lived without the shame and the guilt. Nothing changes, and people become freer. So maybe that's another selling point for people, in that we've lived under, we've lived in this box of oppression, and we've lived with all these chains for so long that we don't know what it is to be free. But once you taste that freedom, you're not gonna want to go back, and you would want that freedom for somebody else. So I think it's our responsibility to go out there, say the words, call things by their names, and call things by their names. Yeah, I think that.
Thank you so much, Jessica, Barbara, and Pam, for joining me tonight. And thank you to our audience who are watching this now. And I hope that you can watch and catch up with the rest of the panels for Adventures Live 2021. Thank you.